All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's about 3:32, so in the interest of keeping this running on time, we'll make a start. Ginagay, welcome. This is Gumbaynggirr country, the place of plenty. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gumbaynggirr Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I'd like to pay my respects to the Gumbaynggirr elders past, present and emerging. The Gumbaynggirr people were traditionally known as the sharing people. This is because the pristine rivers, plentiful oceans and lush forests of their country provided so much that they commonly shared food and resources with people of the other indigenous nations. The beautiful Coffs Coast is also a place that I'm fortunate enough to call home, and it's a place that truly soothes my soul and makes my heart sing. My name is Anna Ricketts. I'm really sorry if you were here for the last education because I'm still talking. New South Wales Regional Manager for Envirocom Australia. It's both a pleasure and a privilege to chair this final education session of day one of Waste 2023. We have 4 excellent speakers with a wealth of experience in waste education, resource recovery, community engagement and behaviour change. As you're probably well aware now, each speaker gets 20 minutes to present. At the conclusion of all the presentations, we'll have question time. All the presenters will be invited back up to the stage. There's also, welcome to our online audience, wherever you may be. You're welcome to post questions anytime, and those will also be asked at the end. Can I just remind you to please either turn off your phone or place them on silent. If you must take a call, can I ask you to please leave the room, but be aware when you do so, you may miss something that you regret. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our first presenter to the stage, Virginia Brunton, delivering her presentation on the value of waste education. Virginia is Principal Consultant Organics and Education with MRA Consulting Group. Thank you, Virginia.
Welcome, everybody. Now, I know you're all educators, which means you're really, really into people. But this is all about numbers, so don't fall asleep, please. I'm a scientist, I'm an educator, and I'm a consultant, which means I live and breathe numbers. And I believe that we don't do things unless there is, particularly in council where you're cash-strapped, unless there's a really good economic justification for doing so. That's the premise, and you would have heard Mike over the millions of years talking about very pragmatic ways of recovering materials, and they've got to be economic. So when WesRock asked us to look into this question of what is the value of education, I initially thought it would be a fairly seamless piece of work to do. Get a set of data on one side, get a set of data on the other. One talks about outcomes, one talks about what we spent to get those outcomes, and look for correlations between them. It didn't turn out to be that easy. So WesRock were asking, how much do we need to spend? FOGO is coming. EPA will fund some form of education, but how much does that need to be? And my question was, well, where do you want to get to? And, I landed on this 1.5% because it's got a correlation to climate action. So what do we need to spend to get to 1.5%? The national average for, let's say, I'm talking about contamination there. The national average for contamination in FOGO is 2%, 2.2%. Some days it's really bad, some days it's not so great, some days it's fantastic, some councils are really, really good. But overall, it's about 2%. So if we're going to aim for 2%, let's aim for 1.5%, then we've got a bit of, we can hedge our bets a little bit. So we looked at what outcomes can we measure in terms of education. We can look at, the outcome versus spend. We can look at return on investment. How much do we spend versus how much are we saving? We can look at case studies that tell particular stories, and we could also try and have a look at social and environmental benefits. So this is what we did. These are the sort of data sets I was trying to gather. These are the sources of the data. So we used WesRock Council's data where it was available, We also selected some other urban metropolitan councils that have had FOGO for some time, looked at what data they had available. We then sort of discovered that all of this was a bit scant, so I started to look at individual trials that had a particular spend and a particular outcome. Surely I can get some good correlation there. We looked at the war data, and we looked at published literature, scientific literature, and then I started looking at just New South Wales, or just Sydney, then New South Wales, and I had to broaden the scope to eastern states, and then there still wasn't very much, so then I expanded it to the whole of Australia, and still I had whole gaps in the data. So then we also had a look at some of the UK data. What are they called? Starts with W, anyway. What? Yes, RAP, thank you. And what we found was that after 20, I've been in this game for more than 20 years, there's not a great deal of reliable impact data from our education. Now, we always know that measuring the impact of education is problematic because people's behaviour changes due to a number of different inputs. So just one program doesn't necessarily deliver one outcome. But what we didn't have is a good correlation between how much people are spending and the outcomes that they were expecting, let alone achieved. And this is really the sort of takeaway message, is that we've really got to concentrate a whole lot more on quantifying our outcomes. We're finding it hard when we're in this linear transition, you know, we're still in this recycling pathway, we're going to find it a whole lot more harder to try and measure these outcomes when we go circular. So we've got to find some systems of solidly measuring impact so we know where we're going and so we can make the changes that we need to make. We're spending somewhere between $16 and $80 million on education nationally, but we really don't know where those impacts are. The cost to the economy of the contamination in recycling, have I got it there? Yeah, $57 million. That's a lot of money. You know, we could be spending that on education and not having that contamination in the recycling. So whilst the question initially for WesRock was about how much do we have to spend on FOGO education, there simply wasn't the experience in the national scene to give us that data. So I've also included the data that's available on recycling. And I started to try and think, well, if there's a relationship in recycling, perhaps we can find a relationship in FOGO, spend on education, and FOGO outcomes. The sort of outcomes I was looking for were reductions in contamination and increase in capture. But anyway, I'll get to the but in a moment. There should be, in theory, a diminishing returns relationship between education spend and outcome. Eventually, the more you spend on education, the outcome doesn't improve. So there must be a sweet spot. You can spend nothing or very little on education and get some really adverse outcomes. But by the time you get down to a big spend, you know, you're not going to improve the outcomes much more because there's other limiting factors. There's just humans. And so there's a sweet spot here. And what we were trying to find in the data is that sweet spot. So that's the relationship I'm looking for in the data. And scientists use a regression analysis to do this. And I'm not sure if you can see those R-squared numbers. R-squared is the thing that they use for regression analysis. And the closer to 1, the better the correlation between the data. So if that line was a 45-degree angle, there's a really close correlation between one set of data and another. If it was, you know, and that equals 1, a 1-to-1 relationship. Spend $1 here, get $1 worth of impact over there. Really quite close correlation. Now, on the left-hand side is the recycling data. And even though that looks like a nice, a delta curve there, it's not. The best regression line, so those lines are lines of best fit. The computer puts all the data together, works out what the best fit is, the best relationship is. And that relationship is 0.01. So not really very close to 1 at all. But what it does, if we just sort of ignore the anomalies in the data, because waste data is incredibly variable, anyone who's done an audit or looked at audit data can see that there's massive significant differences between the means. So it's quite a messy data set. So, I was hard pushed to find correlations in messy data sets, but we tried. And on the right-hand side is the FOGO data. Now, this data is a combination of all those data sets that I mentioned earlier. Lots of New South Wales metro data there. Lots of New South Wales regional data. They're that's where the most of the FOGO is in New South Wales. There's a good set of data from Melbourne and a bit of good data from Perth. But it's all over the shop, okay? There doesn't look like a really strong relationship between how much councils are spending, this is not hypothetical, this is how much councils are spending versus the reported contamination rate in their FOGO. The average is just under 2% in this data set. And that average sits at about $10 spend. That is not a very reliable number because of the scatter of data, but it gives us a place to work from. So I then took that and thought, okay, what's causing all this variation? Is it council size? Is it because the FOGO is young, like it's only been in place for a year or two? Is it because it's been there for a while? So I mucked around with the data quite a bit to try and find evidence of any sort of justifiable correlation. So I split councils up between large and small. Small was less than 15,000 households. Large was over that. So that's probably not, anyway, look, I had to find something. So 15,000 households and more than 15,000 households. And what that showed was that smaller councils per household spend a lot more money. Larger councils spend a lot more money to get the same outcome. Let that sink in for a bit. Harder for large councils to get the change they want because of diversity, because it's difficult to spread the message so far. Don't know. Look, it's worth looking into. But smaller councils, simply because there are less households, say all councils are spending $200,000, smaller councils are spending $200,000 for 15,000 households, large councils for 35,000, 50,000 households. So, of course, smaller councils are spending more money per capita. But larger councils, it takes more money to get the same result as smaller councils. So the message in smaller councils must be tighter, easier to deliver. Maybe their controls on contamination are better, smaller, geographically, controllable. We don't really know. That work hasn't been done. But for a spend of $6 per household, small councils can get to 1.5%, but large councils need to spend $9 per household to get to 1.5%. With this data set. So lots and lots of caveats, this is not set in stone. This is data that's scattered, but I'm trying to find some correlation here. Just to guide us, to guide the funding bodies, to get them to understand just how expensive and how difficult education is, and also can be when you're trying to roll out FOGO, particularly FOGO. So that's sort of just looking for correlations. Then I thought, well, let's try and find, if I cherry pick the data that I know a lot about and that has got quite solid basis and understanding and mechanics and rigour behind it, let's see what those really solid data sets look like. And these are cherry picked from councils in New South Wales. And you shouldn't do this with scientific data, but what I did was pull it out to see if there is possibly a relationship when I know the science is good, when I know that the data collection has been sound. And we get a bit of a good curve. Like we've got a 0.8 correlation there, which is not too bad. Like it's getting close to 0.9, it's 0.88. It virtually is 0.9, which is not too far off 1. So look, we're getting there. And what this data shows is that with not much effort in education, you can look forward to, a 7% contamination. With some education, you can get 2 to 3% contamination, and that's mostly where councils are sitting. But with an extensive education program, where you're spending more than $10 per household, you're up there towards the $15 per household, you can get very good outcomes. So that's a bit of theory. Then I thought I'd try and test this with some real data from a couple of trials. And the first of those was I looked at the war data, and between 2018 and 26 councils went FOGO. So I had, before 2018, I had pre-FOGO data, and then there was post-FOGO data. And I looked to see how much waste, how much food shifted from the red bin to the green bin, and what that differential meant in terms of return on investment. So the landfill bin costs a lot more to landfill than it does to process FOGO, mostly. Don't shout me out here. But mostly it's cheaper to process organics into FOGO than it is to landfill it, depending on the cost of your local landfill, of course. And what that calculation showed, where there's a 1 to 1.3 return on investment, which is not too bad. Like it's a 30% increase. You spend $1, you save $1.30 on avoided landfilling costs. So that was quite solid. That means that there is an economic argument for going to FOGO. Of course, there's lots of caveats around that, and it's all about your contracting, and if you can go and get a very competitive contracting arrangement, and you're not just relying on one processor or one collection contract. So there's a lot of other stuff that impacts that. But in theory, if you're just looking at return on investment for investing in FOGO, there's about a 0.3%, a 30% return on investment, 1.3 increase. Mind you, not a lot of correlation in that either, but let's just go with it. The other thing I did to again look at avoided landfill costs was to look at the best and the worst performing councils. So again, trawling through the contamination data that I had and the war data, we could look at the best performing councils were spending more than $10 per household and getting very low contamination rate. And the least performing councils were, not spending below $5 per household. And so that return on investment showed that the more you spend, the more you gain, but it's a flattening curve again, because there is a threshold which things do not further improve. So if we look at a Sydney council, processing costs are about $310. That's sort of, $160 worth of processing costs and about $150 a tonne just to pick the stuff up. So for every tonne of contamination that you've got in your bin, it's costing you $310 to pick it up, process it, and get rid of it, because your processor is processing contamination as well as the things that they're meant to process. So if you've got $310 to spend on every tonne of contamination, you can convert that $310 to education and reduce your contamination. And what that, so there's, for every tonne of contamination avoided, you've got $310 to spend on education. So that's one way of working it out. If you need to push the argument up to the bean counters about why you need to spend money on reducing contamination, it's because it's costing you $310 in Sydney. to process that contamination, because it just shouldn't be in that bin. This is just an example, and it's becoming an increasing phenomena in FOGO processing contracts, where there are penalty clauses that are tendered out. So not every council is going down this track, but we're seeing it quite a bit in councils wanting to share that burden of contamination and being prepared to pay for it. And because they know that there's a penalty coming when you get above 3% or 5% contamination, that forces the burden back onto councils to reduce that contamination. So we had this conversation yesterday in the AORA forum about that shared risk. And councils need to grow with that conversation and be prepared to share the risk, because councils are the closest to residents. The processors and the collection contracts, another step away from controlling what's in those bins. Thank you. So, this then comparing, well, what if our contamination dropped from 5% to 2.5%? Well, we've got, $240,000 we can spend, in theory. So we could have that saving that we can justify to spend on education. So there's, I'm just looking for arguments here to justify education spend and get an idea of what it should be. So then I looked at some case studies, and Albury City Council is a great one to pore over because they've done some fantastic work over a long period of time. One particular project was to look at increasing the amount of food that was actually in the FOGO, increasing the amount of food in the FOGO bin. So it was a deliberate part of the overall half waste program. A $60,000 budget was allocated to it, and it simply focused on getting more food into the red bin. And the differential between the how much food was left in the red bin compared to how much had travelled to the green bin showed, well, there was nearly a 2 kilo difference, and that cost saving was about a 1-to-4 ratio. The cost of landfilling that food was 4 times more overall than the cost of that $60,000. So the amount of food that shifted was quite significant, and it goes to show that if you have a focus campaign with very deliberate outcomes, you can get some very good cost-benefit ratios. Mind you, that's a part of the whole half waste program that has been there for years, but it was a nice little picture of a targeted program for just one outcome. How much more capture can we get in that food bin? The EPA funded 3 councils to do what they could with some education, and that program showed that they were all targeting contamination, and there was between a 2.1% decrease in contamination to a 0.5% decrease in contamination. So those R-squareds aren't great, but they do show that you spend effort in a focused way, you can get improvements. We then made a model, and I'm sure if you talk to Wesrock, they'll share that model with you, where you can put in your known contamination rates and what you want to spend on education, and it'll spit out, or what contamination you want to get to and what you need to spend, and it'll play with your household data quite nicely. The social environmental benefits, the surveys this morning have shown that there's a lot of support out there for FOGO. People are willing to participate, and we need to, find ways to encourage them to find what's in it for me, what drives, what makes people care, and not focus sometimes where there are obviously logistical barriers, but focus really on what it takes. What does it take for an individual? What motivates a group of people? What motivates an individual to actually care about what goes in the bin? Which is where this whole closed loop comes from. If they know where the FOGO is going and it's coming back onto sporting fields, or it's, creating food that you're going to eat, there's a lot closer relationship to it. But I haven't seen the data out there to support those really wild statements. So all of you out there that are doing fantastic education programs, really collect some nice solid data for us, because otherwise I'll be out of a job, and that's not very good for me. But in conclusion, little effort in little effort in education, we know what those outcomes are like. But education can have a really positive return on avoided landfill costs, on avoided contamination penalties if your contracts have those, and increasingly they are going to. And there are definitely social benefits from FOGO programs. So next steps, collect data. Just collect it, use it, understand it, ask us to analyse it, give it to anybody to analyse, make some sense out of your data, but know what it is you're spending. Really know what it is you're spending. You know what your education budgets are, but also factor in what your management fees, what your upper management are contributing, what all of your education officers are contributing, so that you can really nail what it takes to get to where you want to get to. That's it from me.
The importance of number crunching and data collection, that's fascinating. Thanks so much, Virginia. I'd now like to invite Fiona Stock to the stage to deliver her catchy titled presentation, Truck Fire Campaign, Do Your Part and Fires Won't Start. Fiona is Senior Coordinator of Waste, Technical and Business Services for Sutherland Shire Council. Can we please welcome Fiona to the stage?
Well, thanks everyone. I think this is going to be an issue that is going to be plaguing us for quite some time, so I'm glad that you're here to share from Council's perspective what we found in just a short amount of time, what we've done as a bit of a reaction to it, but as I said, I'm happy to share and to get some insights from you guys as well. Now, hopefully I can go the right way today. Okay. So over the last 4 years, the waste industry has seen a lot of facility and truck fires. What we found is that the range in damage from minimal damage to trucks to the complete demolition requiring of some of the facilities. It costs millions of dollars, lost hours of operation, and the effects of this is every step of that chain. So whether you're the household, whether you're the processor, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together and we've got to do something about it. We've seen this as my opinion is, it's a reliance on technology that has grown exponentially. The technology, the must-haves, we can't live without these things, and most of them seem to come with batteries. So this is, I'm just going to show you a quick clip here. This is footage from one of our trucks just to show you how quickly the fires start. Let's hope it's going to work. All right, so, yeah, and we're off. Okay, so at Sutherland we have day labour. And all of our drivers are trained in what to do when they get a fire starting. So they obviously call straight into the depot, we get onto the fireys, and we then tell the driver they know to move to a secure spot, meet the fire brigade, and then the fire brigade will tell them what to do from there. Sometimes they extinguish it in the back of the hopper. Other times they've had to dump the load on the street. So it's a mix. And sometimes we've had minimal damage to our trucks. Other times we've actually lost 2 trucks. One because of the fire and the other one because the fire is cut into the hopper and opened the hopper up to then put the fire out. All right, so what was the cause? So there's obviously a lot of things. Mainly it's hazardous material, but we're seeing a lot of batteries. So as you can see, I've got a couple of photos of household things in my house that have batteries. But as you can see, there are many things. Toys, tools, e-bikes, computers, vapes are going to be a big thing, coming up now. They all contain combustible, flammable, corrosive, toxic to the environment elements, and they not only harm human health from that toxicity, but they also cause truck fires. They can emit gases, and what I learnt from putting this presentation together was a lithium battery contains lithium and water, and when they mix, bang, you get it just combusts. So I didn't know that before, so. Okay. And this is what it looks like afterwards. So up in the top, we can see a Dyson stick vacuum cleaner, well, what's left of it, and the truck wasn't looking so great afterwards either. Over here we can see we've had to dump a load. We recently had to be under the escort of the fire brigade to Lucas Heights, where we were met with another fire brigade to then tip the load and put it out. So it's quite scary when it happens, and I'm really thankful that we've got a team of drivers who are very experienced and quick to deal with these sort of things. So what's our response been? All right, of course, the annual calendar, truck wraps, social media videos. We have tried our hardest to educate the community in a really short amount of time because this just started happening, and as I said, we've had 4 truck fires in probably the last couple of years. We currently have services, and we've always had them, where you can drop your batteries off at customer service and libraries, but they're still getting into the garbage bins. Just as a point, we've had truck fires in our garbage trucks, recycling, and also in our clean-up trucks. So it's not like it's just one stream, it seems to be across the streams, except for green waste, of course. So we run 2 household chemical events per annum, and each of those is over 3 days. And what we've been told from our statistics is that we actually have the largest in the state household chemical collection. We have about 8,000 cars visit our site over the 3 days, and we're diverting 300 tonnes of chemicals correctly, but we're still getting truck fires. That's not getting away from that. We've also seen an increase in the battery collections that we have at our customer service and libraries. We completed 17 collections of full bins last year, which was up from 12 collections the year before. Just a couple of other examples. We've looked at the Mayor's message, a rates mail out, and a little animated video. And what we've tried to do is do a real broad mix of media types as well as messages, just to try and get that message through to the community. And more recently, we've been approached by the New South Wales EPA, and we've been working with them. They're going to come out with a, I don't know when, but soon, a statewide campaign on removing batteries from the waste stream. So that will be something that we can look forward to. So my last video is just, this was one that we put on Facebook. We received 1,000 hits in an hour on this post. And we feel this has been one of our most successful. What we found is when you're actually putting the pictures into people's faces, Facebook, those sort of things, they're actually getting the message. Okay, so we ran a survey on the data that we have and the information that we've put out there so far. What we found was that 52% knew about batteries causing fires. What they said to us was the rates mail out was the best way to get that information across, or a letterbox drop. And as educators, we've kind of moved on from that. It's a little bit antiquated, and we're now doing social media posts, but I thought that was quite interesting. And just to summarise, the disposal of hazardous waste, we need a holistic messaging across the whole of New South Wales, Australia. We need that it's a safety concern, it costs money, it's a safety concern, and we're losing facilities as well. We need to ensure that we make collection of batteries available to residents. They need to be able to do this as easily as they possibly can. And this will minimise lazy behaviour, if that's what the cause of it is. And what we've looked at recently, we are part of the Recycle Smart program, and we've actually included batteries as part of that. So we're trying every avenue we can. If you go to the library, take them to the library. If you go to the admin building, take them to the admin building. If you don't want to do either of those, return them back to Woolies, Aldi. Well, then we'll bring the collection to your home. So, but thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Certainly a very topical issue, and that footage was quite outstanding. Okay, can we now please welcome Michelle Mandl to the stage for her presentation, Innovative and Best Practice Examples Across Australia, Engaging Communities in Resource Recovery. Michelle is General Manager Communications, Customer and Engagement for TOMRA Cleanaway. Thank you, Michelle.
Hi everybody, thank you for spending your first afternoon of the conference here with me. I feel like I've got a bit of a hard sell after that, Fiona. There are no fires in what I'm talking about, and potentially I will be telling some of you how to suck eggs, because when I sort of sat back and thought about what it was I hoped to have here today, it was actually a panel that I'd recommended, and instead they didn't have time for that and said you can have 20 minutes and do it instead. So what I've sought to do is kind of go back to the beginning, you know, and think about, you know, what it is that we do as educators in resource recovery, and how we can tie a lot of the different campaigns, practices and things you've been hearing about in the education stream today together, and just go back to the beginning about what does it mean, how do we do our best. And it probably links to things Virginia has said about having data, things Fiona has said about having broad campaigns that deal with overarching messages. So just a little overview. What is social marketing? Can I have a quick show of hands? Has anyone here heard of social marketing, and noting that's not social media marketing? Okay, you'll learn something great. Presentations of some exemplar programs. They'll be very common to all of you if you work in waste, and then just going through what the themes are across all the different examples that I'm providing. I work for TOMRA Cleanaway, by the way. We're the network operator for Return and Earn. That will be one of the best practice examples I bring to you, funnily enough. So what is social marketing? Social marketing is a branch or approach of marketing that focuses on delivering sustained behaviour change in individuals or communities that demonstrate a person or society. And they'll usually focus on health or environment. So a couple of examples up here on the left. Does everyone remember Norm from the 80s and the Life Unit campaign? One of the most successful campaigns and examples of social marketing that we've had in Australia. Do the right bin. Remember it? I do. I was an 80s kid. You're shaking your head, you're too young. Another really, really good example of a broad-scale campaign that helped shift people's behaviour with litter. You know, when we think about the different types of social marketing out there, I know a lot of councils use community-based social marketing, which leverages really grassroots and education-founded activities. That's just another approach to it. In the end, it's all the same. It's about having an assessment, benchmarking, baselining, having some sort of an intervention campaign that's full of tactics that deliver an outcome, and then reassessing against what you did in the beginning. Pretty simple. These are my children. I'm very proud of them. This wouldn't be a presentation for me if they weren't in the presentation. So again, you know, what does benchmarking mean? It means asking key questions of our communities in which we operate, because I referred to Harry Styles this morning. I'll do it again. You know it's not the same as it was. Communities shift. They move and change all the time, and COVID has absolutely changed the way our communities operate. We need to do that through community surveys, through focus groups. You know, we need to ask them what they know. We need to interact with them, and that's a costly exercise. And that's quite often one of the things that sort of provides a stumbling block in most social marketing campaigns. We need to clarify objectives and actually clearly define the behaviour we're trying to shift. So in New South Wales, using Return and Earn as an example, it was an anti-litter campaign. It was the biggest anti-litter campaign that the state had ever delivered upon, and they had really key metrics around what that was they were trying to achieve. We also need to define the success measure, what it is that we're trying to measure against. So what are the interventions? Have they been done before? Are there particular interventions that are specific to our community? You know, if you've got a high multi-unit dwelling population, there's no point trying to do something that you do in a regional community there. There might be similarities in the approach that would work, but the whole broad-scale campaign wouldn't necessarily work. And then again, going back to the beginning, you need to measure the impact of what you've done. There's no point just delivering it saying, yay, job done. You actually have to go back and reassess and then review that outcome against what you defined in the beginning as your benchmark and actually show that you've delivered some sort of incremental achievement, hopefully. And if it's failed, well, that's also an outcome. It happens. And then further to that, continually review and approve. Exactly as I said before, the communities aren't static. We aren't static as consumers. You know, our behaviours aren't static. We are always shifting. We're always changing. So a couple of examples that I'm going to go through. I might miss the second one depending on how much time I've got, but wanting to focus on something that's really simple. It will resonate with most people in the room if they're from municipal education. It's publicly available information. Central Coast Council, located on the New South Wales coast, just north of Sydney. It's a massive council. It's an amalgamation of the former Gosford and Wyong councils. It's a very new council as a result. 2016 it was formed. There are more than 150,000 households in the LGA, you know, plenty more, you know, by head of population in the area as well. One of the identified issues that they had is illegally dumped curbside material. So that is material that is not being booked in through the correct process with the waste collection contractor. So this is something I'm sure every municipality in Australia has, and this has just been their approach to managing that with their contractor. So the goal, the objective, was to transition residents from illegally dumping their curbside material to a booked curbside council service. Pretty simple, but it's something that, you know, obviously if you look at the cost of managing a reactive clean-up process with a booked-in clean-up process, there was considerable benefit to gain. So what did they do? Central Coast Council operates an overarching waste campaign, which is fantastic. It's called One Coast. I encourage you to look it up. The link is there. They conducted a baseline audit, just as described, that was more than 600 households and having a direct inspection of the material placed out at clean-up and then reassessing that against what had been booked in. It demonstrated a result that 50% were booked and 50% were illegally dumped. So pretty clear 50-50 split with how the community were choosing to engage in this particular activity. In terms of identifying and delivering interventions based on their community, they conducted direct communication with households, provided information about booking service, so actually armed them with education about what it was they were expected to do. So they set expectations for the community. They used punitive measures in this instance as well, so through council ranges and threats of fines, which is not necessarily what we like to do, but was an additional measure required. They also had their overarching integrated campaign for One Coast that used multiple channels. So the overarching campaign was everywhere. It was everywhere across the LGA, and it was aligned to the Keep Your Street Neat, which focused on street amenity in the LGA. So it was in social media, radio, out of home, you know, anywhere that the community were visiting and attending, you'd see the campaign. The success measures that they defined was that households were removing the dump material from the curbside, then booking in their clean-up, exactly what they wanted them to do. And then the re-auditing process demonstrated that there was a less than 8% re-offence in this. So it's a very simple, you know, you sort of think and go, that's so simple, but, you know, it's demonstration of the process that you need to go through to get a result. And in terms of how they're planning on continuously reviewing, they're going to be doing more broad-scale programs in the local government area with interventions to increase awareness for the community about expectations. MUDs are a constant source of, I guess, frustration in terms of contamination, and I know, you know, for us in Return and Earn land, multi-unit dwellings demonstrate to us a challenge. We have the issue where there's a lack of ownership of bins in multi-unit dwellings. You know, there's bin rooms, they're hidden away, people can just go and, you know, hide their material as they wish and walk away, and it's not their problem anymore. In this example, Hornsby Shire Council, with their contractor, went through another similar broader campaign program and focused those specifically on mud recycling contamination. So it's a northern Sydney suburb, just to put it in geography for you. Smaller population in a more dense environment. More than 20% of the total LGA is a multi-unit dwelling. And there's a really clear buy-in from council overall with their waste matters strategy and campaign that they're running in line with it. So the issue identified was recycling contamination rates were higher in MUDs than SUD curbside recycling bins. Oopsies, sorry. So what did they do? Again, through the Waste Matters program, they baselined their audit. They did a benchmark that was through a visual inspection, providing volumetric estimates of contamination and the types of contaminants, and then a community waste working group was developed. This meant that they were able to engage directly with, I guess, the people who were causing the problem as well, and making sure that they were delivering interventions that were appropriate to their needs. There was a lot of high-level face-to-face engagement, is my understanding, with this activity that involved strata, facility management and body corporate, and actually holding information sessions directly with the households as well. There were additional household tactical activities like the provision of collection baskets, so actually providing receptacles to enable the households to correctly separate their materials before they took them to the bin rooms as well. And then again, success measures were the re-estimation and assessment of contamination, and then noting, that there was actually an increasing shift in eligible containers for recycling, moving from general waste to recycling, which was actually not one of the outcomes, but because the overall community was better educated, it was a positive shift that occurred. In terms of what Hornsby are planning on doing, it's a continual assessment, of course, of contamination. You can't, with any of projects that you put out into the community, set and forget. You need to continually revisit and ensure that it's fit for purpose. And then redefining the interventions based on community feedback and needs is something that they've committed to as well, given the multi-unit dwellings are going up constantly in the area and bringing new residents in. So moving to my current area of employment, Return and Earn is the New South Wales Container Deposit Scheme. It's demonstration of what a very large-scale interventionist program can deliver. Australia's probably biggest population, I think is correct to say, in New South Wales, more than 8 million citizens. We've got a diverse population that's dispersed, with regional centres outside of metropolitan Sydney. And in New South Wales, in the probably last 10 years, they'd identified that drink containers were the primary visual pollutant in the litter stream. So not only was it a commonly or most commonly littered item, it was also very large. So when you think about, litter streams, cigarette butts is something you automatically go to, soft plastics is something you automatically go to, but the drink containers are quite big. And so in terms of amenity of litter, they tend to stand out a little bit. So the government decided they wanted to implement a container deposit scheme. Again, it had been demonstrated elsewhere in the globe that it was best practice in terms of reducing litter overall. And the goal was that, to reduce litter by implementing a CDS. So they went out to tender to do that. And in 2017, on 1 December, it actually started. So as you can see, 44% of all litter was identified as drink containers specifically. So how did they define or baseline what the actual issue was? Continual litter surveys were used. There are a whole range of different litter surveys, but I know anecdotally through the tour we took yesterday and again today, we've heard from councils that there has been an improvement of drink container litter across New South Wales, which is awesome. There was considerable community and stakeholder consultation. If anyone's been in councils for a little while, you most certainly will have been involved in EPA's consultation prior to the scheme commencement. There was a whole range of legislative, regulatory and policy development that occurred over years as well. So it was a very, very large-scale change to implement an extended producer responsibility scheme for the state. One of the key things that defines Return and Earn and container deposit schemes is the financial reward that's placed on the item. Unlike Red Cycle or the other, not the voluntary schemes that occur, we as a community actually pay for the scheme, and that sort of, I don't know if anyone has been through voluntary student unionism back in the late 90s, you'll remember that shift, and I pay for it, therefore I use it. It's a little bit like that with the container deposit scheme, and it's certainly what our community told us early on. What we've done also as network operator TOMRA Cleanaway, and one of the the outcomes that the government wanted to deliver was a consistent brand and a consistent experience for consumers. So by making it convenient, you're actually giving people the best possible opportunity to participate in the scheme. And that meant for us, in the absence of a return to retail container model, co-locating most of our return points with retail where possible, or partnering with not-for-profits, existing businesses, other organisations, including councils, to have our return points out in the community. The refund amount was, of course, the same, and through our partners of Exchange for Change, we've been able to be really strong with our brand for Return and Earn. Out there you can see a picture of a reverse vending machine there. I think that's out at Richmond in the Hawkesbury. They look the same no matter where you go. So you could be in the Hawkesbury, or you could be in the Hunter, you could be in Byron, you could be in Bega. Our return points look the same. And that's a really important cue for our community to be able to recognise how to participate in our intervention, our tactic for litter. So what are the success measures here? It was litter reduction. It was achieved quickly and it was sustained, and that's something I think that's really unique. We did think that COVID would impact quite considerably, and in this particular instance it didn't. We were able to sustain the litter reduction across the state, which is great. The community education is consistent across the state, and the recycling rates overall have lifted. I think Alex Young mentioned this morning in our CDS panel, or someone did, maybe it was Rob Kelman, but recycling rates for eligible containers in curbside was about 32% before the scheme started, and because there's been such a considerable amount of effort put into education, the overall recycling rates have lifted in New South Wales to beyond 60, and that's been, not an intended consequence, but because the community are so aware now of what eligible containers are to be part of the scheme and can be recycled, it's been a great input into something else that's happened, which is circular economy. So in terms of what we do for the scheme, we do go through continual assessment and review with our scheme partners at Exchange for Change. We do a biannual research into the community, and we have that benefit because it is funded by Beverage that we can. It's also a contractual requirement to continually review and survey what's happening out in the community, and then as a result, we shift our marketing focus ongoing. So again, it's not set and forget, it's continually reviewed. So just to quickly wrap up about what it is that's consistent across all of these different, they seem so simple, they seem so basic, but the underpinning activities are the same. It's actually assessing to benchmark and get your baseline data for what your project is. Make sure that you're engaging with your community to understand what they need, what their motivations are to deliver on the outcome you want them to do. Make sure your interventions are delivered, they're tactical and they're assessed according to your success measures that you've defined, and then continually review and improve to redefine your success going forward. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Just the value of targeted and strategic education approaches. Okay, last but not least, let's welcome Alexandra Bastos to the stage for her presentation, Small Change, Big Difference, Randwick's FOGO Education and Engagement Campaign. Alexandra is a Waste and Resource Recovery Project Officer for Randwick City Council.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sticking around, and thanks for having me today to share some insights from Randwick's FOGO journey and the Community Education and Engagement Program. So Randwick was the first in the Metropolitan Council in Sydney to implement FOGO to all its residents, and the second in the Greater Sydney area. And I feel very lucky for having had the opportunity to work with this great team of in Randwick and our consultants and contractors, and help with the implementation of this great project. So if anyone in the room is working on the FOGO implementation or planning on implementing FOGO, I hope I'll provide some valuable information that may assist you in your process. So I'm just gonna give you some background information about Randwick, about our community, about our FOGO service. Then I'm going to go through some key elements of our FOGO education program and some of the planning activities that we went through. And then I'll share some key lessons that we learned from our experience. So welcome to Randwick City Council. Randwick is a local government area located in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. It's about 4 to 14 kilometers south of the CBD. It's the second oldest local government area in New South Wales. It was established in 1859. It has an area of 36 square kilometers and 24 kilometers of coastline. Randwick is home to 155,000 residents and 60,000 dwellings. And 65% of our dwellings are MUDs, or multi-unit dwellings. And Randwick has one of the largest population densities in Australia. Our community is very diverse, multi-ethnic and transient. We have more than 14,000 students at UNSW, the University of New South Wales, and more than 4,000 public housing properties. So I guess this background is just to explain that we do work in a very beautiful part of the planet with some beautiful natural areas, but it is an urban environment. And our community is very vibrant and diverse, but that also creates its own challenges when it comes to waste management practices and FOGO. So we've been traveling the FOGO journey for quite a while now. And here on the screen, you can see some of our milestones, but I'm just gonna mention two that I think were very important during the development of our education program. And the first one is the food waste trial, which we implemented in 2013, and it provided us with great insights on the risks and challenges associated with food waste collection. And in 2019, we did a community consultation, and 55% of our residents supported the rollout of FOGO, so we thought, yeah, that's the way to go. In July 2020, we signed a new collection contract, and then in January 2021, so 6 months later, we started delivering the new bins, and in March 2021, the new services started. So we changed the collection frequency of our green bins. They used to be collected fortnightly, now they collected weekly, and we changed the collection frequency of the red bins for houses only. So now they collected fortnightly. But we did increase the size of the bins for houses too, to make up for that reduction in collection frequency. So all these changes to the waste services needed to be communicated to our residents. And we knew that council couldn't do FOGO on its own, but we needed to get everyone on board to make it work. And from a behavior change perspective, FOGO requires residents to store a new bin in the kitchen, use compostable liners, change the way they separate their waste, and overcome the perceived idea that FOGO is dirty, which is particularly challenging in multi-unit dwellings where the bins are shared. Yes, so, and you've got to think that at the time, no one knew what FOGO meant. Not many people are used to compostable liners. Those were all new concepts that we were introducing to our community. And our research has shown as well that a lot of councils that had implemented FOGO before had strongly relied on education. So our education program was strongly supported by councillors and management, and that support is really critical, was really critical too. So I'm gonna go through our community education and engagement program now. So we started the planning, and during the development of our education plan, one of the first steps we took was to consider who our stakeholders were, and our target audience. And this stage is really important because from here we could think of strategies and different messagings to reach the different stakeholders. Because one message, like it was said here before, one work for everyone. So it's really important to understand your audience really well and to adapt the communication to speak to their hearts, to speak their language, basically. So we listed all the players that we should communicate with, and that included residents in SUDs, in houses, residents in unit blocks, building management, so strata managers, real estate agents, cleaners, body corporate, UNSW students, school students, international communities, etc., and council staff as well. We also did a risk analysis, and we took some time to reflect on all the possible challenges that we could face. So things like nappies sitting in the red bin in a fortnightly collection, and issues with smells and bugs and things like that. And by doing that, we planned ahead for these issues, and we were prepared for them when time came. And from this process, and based on the results of our food waste trial and the research we had done on what other councils had done in Australia and overseas, we drafted our education plan, and that was divided into 3 stages: pre-implementation, during implementation, and post-implementation. So this is just an overview of some of the elements we used in our campaign. So we made use of behavior change and social marketing and traditional marketing tools and strategies. We designed more than 170 educational materials, things like print and digital advertising, articles, social media posts, videos, bus stop posters, street banners, etc. We delivered more than 50 engagement activities like pop-up stalls and workshops, face-to-face interactions. Costa was very generous, and I guess we were very lucky to have his support, so we developed a whole series of videos with him. We created the Friends of FOGO group, and asked our residents to voluntarily sign in and help spreading the word to their local neighborhoods and communities. And also we created some targeted education elements. I'm gonna talk a little bit more soon. So now I'm just gonna go through each one of these stages just quickly to give you a better understanding of what they were like. So the stage 1, the pre-implementation stage, it started 5 months prior to the service commencement and spent the months leading up to the service launch. This was supposed to be a teaser campaign, so as to build public's interest through curiosity and enthusiasm. The key message here was FOGO is coming. FOGO is small change, big difference. So it's a very simple message, easy to understand, and it gives that feeling that the empowerment that people need to make a difference. And we also raised awareness in regards to the amount of food waste we were generating and we were placing in the red bin, and the difference between landfill and composting. And we also informed the residents on all the changes that were going to happen to their waste services. We also started raising awareness within council and training customer service, the customer service team, and working with different departments. So now I'm just gonna play one of the videos. This was the first video we created to give you a little taste of what this stage of the campaign was like. If it plays.
FOGO is coming to Randwick City. What is FOGO? It stands for Food Organics, Garden Organics. You'll soon receive a caddy and compostable liners to collect your food scraps. These go into your new green lid FOGO bin along with garden waste. FOGO will mean a small change, but it will make a big difference. Together, we can reduce waste going to landfill and create compost for farms and parks. FOGO, coming soon to Randwick City.
There you go. So at this stage, we also started cleaning and organizing our database and contacting building managers directly on the phone. That was very important too. And created the targeted materials, with materials translated into 5 languages, materials to mothers groups, UNSW students, etc. The stage 2 comprised of the period when we actually did the bin rollout and the services started. So everyone received a welcome pack with a kitchen caddy and a pack of compostable liners and a whole set of brochures with all the information they needed to start using the service. So it's that tool to help them start separating the foods straight away. The key message here was how to FOGO. So we basically addressed the step-by-step or each one of the behaviors that's needed in food waste recycling, basically, at home to the bin to pick up. So this is the stage when your customer service team really need to be truly trained and equipped with the information to promptly and positively respond to residents' inquiries and complaints. So you need your FAQs and all of that. We had an increase of 900 calls coming through our customer service center a day during this stage. So we engaged 6 additional staff to help delivering the education activities and work with the MUDs directly with building managers and all of that. Did lots of pop-up stores, Facebook Lives, etc. Stage 3 had a focus on the tips and tricks, so addressing issues raised by residents, so how to manage a bin to avoid smells and bugs, and we did a summer campaign for that. And so yeah, now I'm gonna play a video with Costa, which is part of our FOGO Like a Pro series of videos. If it plays.
With flowers, it says it all. Any off-cuts, any dead leaves from your indoor plants, put them all into the FOGO bin, just like anything you can put from the garden. Anything from inside can go in there as well, so that, you know, the lovely flowers that have brought much happiness can bring even more happiness when they go into FOGO.
During this stage, we also celebrated the results with our community. So this is a video we created for the first anniversary of FOGO.
Happy birthday, FOGO! Since we started FOGO, we have collected over 14,000 tonnes of your waste. That's around twice the weight of the steel used in the Anzac Bridge. By using FOGO, you have diverted over 7.3 thousand tonnes of waste from ending up in landfill. It's reduced your red bin content by around 26%. Food that ends up in landfill normally creates greenhouse gases. The amount of FOGO that you've prevented from going to landfill is like taking more than 6,300 cars off the road a year. Thank you so much for using FOGO. It's a small change that has made a huge difference. If you want tips on how to use FOGO, head to our website. Happy birthday, FOGO!
So from this, our education program have changed the direction a little bit with the changes announced by EPA last year. So we kind of had to put that part on hold and communicate the changes. And same with the contamination management program, it's on hold now because we are educating the residents on the new way of doing FOGO. But we've delivered FOGO to 12 schools now, and we now have a permanent team working with the MUDs. So that's ongoing now. So over the first 3 years since we implemented FOGO, we have diverted 29,000 tons of organic waste, which represents a reduction of 26% in the red bin content and 98% increase in organics collection. And we managed to have a pretty low contamination rate at 1.5%. We did a survey 6 months after the service implementation. We are actually looking for non-FOGO users. But we got 817 responses, and only 46 of them were non-FOGO users. And 84% of all respondents rated FOGO either excellent or very good, which shows how much the community loves FOGO. And when we look at the non-FOGO users, the issues that they mentioned were issues in regards to smells and bugs and liners. So if they ran out of liners or things like that. We've got a few awards, which is really great. And just some key lessons. So we had to deliver our program in 6 months. It was a bit of a stressful time, as you can imagine. Other councils would normally recommend 12 to 18 months time frame. So I guess if you have more time, you can, consult on concepts and trial them and test them and then improve them before rolling them out. As I mentioned, we had an increase of 900 calls a day coming through our customer service center. At some point, we had 8,000 emails to respond to. So if we could have had the bigger team, education team earlier, it would have been helpful. So increase the team early. Caddies and liners do encourage residents' participation. It helps breaking that first barrier. And they work like reminders in residents' kitchens and prompts. So yeah, just give them the tool they need to do, to separate their food waste. The success of the campaign shows the importance of using a range of techniques in communicating to the community to capture all audience types and reception levels. So, but people do forget if we're not out there communicating and reminding them of the important role that they're playing. So consistency is very important and continuity, I guess. So the campaign needs to be ongoing, for sure. The messaging needs to be simple and empowering, encouraging, plain English, less is more, and address each one of the behaviors, each one of the barriers, and each one of the issues raised. Don't ignore them, face them. Direct communication is very powerful, so things like pop-up stalls and building their relationship with the building managers and helping them also create solutions for the buildings that they work for. So like issues with chute systems and each building work in a different way, so solutions will be different for each building too. Having a national icon like Costa, beloved, amazing Costa, would have helped for sure. Friends of FOGO, that concept of engaging the early adopters and the champions. So champions are a powerful instrument in spreading a concept. They help building social norms and inspiring others to take action. And everyone loves a tap on the back, so make sure to celebrate the results of your community. They deserve it. We couldn't have done FOGO without them, so it helps them seeing that they're actually achieving results. So those, I guess, are the key lessons we learned. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks very much, Alexandra. How to do FOGO, and I just loved that FOGO birthday cake. Awesome. Okay, would all the presenters like to just pop up to the stage, and we're open for questions if anyone's got any questions for our presenters.
My question was, it's on now, for Alexandra. I was just wondering what you spent on the education program as part of the rollout and how much you've budgeted permanently going forward. The elephant in the room.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's pretty within what Virginia said, actually. So we spent around 400,000 for 60,000 dwellings, so that's around $66.50 per household, which is, yeah.
Plus your own staff time.
Plus, yeah. And
plus their own staff time.
We got 2 grants from EPA as well to help us roll out the education program. So.
And what about the ongoing education program? How do you establish? What about the ongoing budget now that the program's established and you've kind of done the base learning? Yes, you've got to update their learning to make sure you're still meeting the standards, but what's the ongoing budget for an established FOGO education program?
Our budget is not that high anymore. It's at the moment it will be around maybe 80,000. But with all the changes that are happening, everything's kind of in the process of planning and reevaluation, I guess.
We have an online question. It is, what is the main contaminant? It's for you as well, Alexandra. What is the main contaminant in FOGO bins and caddies?
Plastics, yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you all for the presentations, the graveyard shift, so well done. Sorry, Alexandra, one last little question about money. The cost to the resident after FOGO, cheaper or more expensive?
So we calculated the costs, and council is saving approximately $1 million a year. On waste processing and collection.
Question for Fiona. So you've had quite a few fires, but then again, Sutherland's a big council and you've got lots of trucks. Do you feel that in terms of getting fires, you're performing worse or better than the other councils in Sydney? And second part of the question, are you yet seeing that the things that you're doing are having a positive result?
Thanks, Lee. I'm actually going to answer the second part of that first. Because of the recent spate of truck fires, we've really just pushed out a whole lot of material. So we haven't really been able to see if there's been any improvements to that or not, but we're going to keep working on that. So at this point in time, not yet. And I suppose the first part is, I've always been at councils previously that have had waste contractors, and I've never really heard of this as an issue. Sutherland has day labour, as I said, and we seem to have just had a real spate of these truck fires. And then when I've started to talk to other people and I spoke to the EPA about it, it's like, oh yeah, it's happening everywhere. But it just seems to be that something that's flying under the radar and not really knowing about it. And since even speaking to some of my friends, they're sending me Facebook posts of an RFS Facebook post of a truck out at, I think it was Blacktown, and it had to drop its load because it was a hot load as well. So it does seem to be maybe perception that it is increasing, but it might just be something that people just don't talk about, and now we're all losing facilities and actually losing trucks that we're now talking about it more. Yes, yep. So maybe it is more prevalent. I don't know. I'm happy if anyone else has seen an increase in it or if it's just something that's recently happened. But yeah, it just seems to be something that's a new phenomenon.
Thanks, Fiona. My name's Gail from Regroup. Look, we're facing the same thing in Victoria. We've got colleagues here from Solo, Adrian, who's also doing some work. He'll probably have more to say on that and research into it. I guess one of the things I'm trying to think about nationally, how we can get some action on this. So we've been lobbying in Victoria to try and get some sort of statewide task force dedicated to get it happening between industry, government, local government, to get a campaign up to educate the community. So your campaign, Do Your Part and Fires Won't Start, how did you come up with that title? Do you think it's effective? Do we need social research into this to come up with something that's going to be really hard-hitting to use our sort of knowledge in behaviour change? I mean, I guess we're all thinking how are we going to deal with it? Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, and one thing, if I could just say to Alexandra, in Victoria, we've got a program called Small Act, Big Impact, which is the statewide campaign for everything in terms of Sustainability Victoria's campaign. So really, really good that your sort of messaging is similar, aligns with that, and they've done a lot of social research to get that one up. So well done.
Look, I think that's great. I do think we need something that's broader, not just council. I'd love to speak to you afterwards about it more and see how we can, as local government and state government and federal government, join together. Look, honestly, the marketing and that campaign of, fires not starting, it was just a quick catchphrase that we came up with because it just seemed to be such an urgent issue. We needed to come up with something. It's probably not the best thing. I think it's one of those things that grows on you after a while. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, really? But I think we can come up with something better than that. I think that if we can do it broader. And what I've heard from the residents from the survey, so we've done a little bit of work on Join the Conversation with our waste strategy, and one of those questions was, do you want to be contacted for more information? So that's where we got our survey participants from, and so we emailed them and said, hey, you guys wanted to be part of this and know what's going on. Have you seen any of this? And one of the things that a lot of them just didn't know. They didn't know anything about it. A couple of them said, this is surely bigger than Sutherland, come on, guys. But it's been interesting to get that feedback and just see that a lot of residents still don't seem to know.
Hi, I'm Aisha from Penrith Council. We've had a number of truck fires, more so in the last 2 years than in the last 20.
Good. I'm not the only one.
And we are required, our contractors are required to report every time there is a truck fire. So whether or not they didn't do it before and all of a sudden started doing it, I'm not sure. But we're really concerned about oppositional defiance disorder in our community. And I was just wondering if we have got if anyone's done any research on that, because my concern is if people realise that putting batteries in trucks could start fires, whether or not we'll have the opposite effect.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, coming from an extended producer responsibility scheme, do you think a solution for batteries would be something similar? So rather than having a voluntary scheme, actually putting some sort of financial return benefit to the consumer to actually trigger the motivation. Again, think it's things like a Dyson vac. That's not cheap at all. One would imagine if there was a bit of an incentive to the consumer to actually responsibly dispose of that and get it out of the waste stream, it would help resolve the problem. And it's, I'm fairly certain Cleanaway are here. They've got a whole campaign running on the same thing. So it's clearly a broader issue than Sutherland.
Yeah, and I have to say that that sort of oppositional defiance, it does make you wonder sometimes if that would be a lead on if we are campaigning so much about it. And no, I personally, and Sutherland hasn't done any research, but it is something that crossed our mind because, people, it is a fire, and a lot of people, or some people in the community like to run out and look at fires. Yeah, that's definitely something we need to consider.
Hi, Christian from Local Government New South Wales. My question is for Virginia. Virginia, there's lots of councils in New South Wales that are concerned about the lack of, or perceived lack of processing facilities for FOGO, and in particular around the Sydney metro area. What advice would you have for those councils?
A little off topic, but happy to talk to that. Thanks, Christian. I think the sentiment, and this is sort of, I'm channeling Mike Ritchie here. I think the proposal is put the contracts out there, go to expression of interest, tell the industry what you're looking for, listen to what the industry say, because the industry will not build processing facilities unless they know the tonnes are there. So it's, the chicken and egg. I'm sure Mike written an article on this. It's not a chicken and an egg. You need to, as councils, you need to tell the industry what it is that you're looking for, and they will respond with facilities. Sunshine Coast has done this, Tweed has done this. There's lots of examples out there of councils putting up the tonnes and then seeing what the response is from the industry. I know SS Rock and Wes Rock are looking at strategies to do this as well, and if you do it collectively, there's a different response from industry because you're suddenly dealing with 200,000 tonnes and not 50 or 20. So there does need to be some consideration about the size of tonnes you present to the market and whether an individual small player in the space, we want competition, is prepared to take on those tonnes. It's a matter, the market will come. Like, there are processors out there that are very keen to be in this space, good quality compost at the other end, all sorts of different technologies are coming into the space. So don't be afraid of asking the market what it is that they're prepared to offer to you when you say, I've got 50,000 tonnes of FOGO. And also ask them, what their response to contamination will be. What sort of shared relationship do they want for contamination control? I have to, pass on to Mike, who's not here. But there's lots of means of going about it. Don't be afraid to put the tonnes up and see what the industry say.
Any final questions before we finish off? No?
Sorry. I've got a question. When you talked about the plateau point of recycling or getting, recycling out of a bin or whatever it is, whichever stream it is, do we have any details, any data on what that percentage is for the different streams?
For recycling, it's about 8%. For FOGO, it's about 3 to 4%. Although, the average is 2%. There's not many councils out there that are getting worse than 4%.
Yeah.
If they are, it's a really early stage FOGO, or they've got surprisingly complex communities, or they really just haven't done a very good education program. Okay. And those curves differ everywhere. That's the other thing. It's such a little complex piece that because every community is somewhat different, that the relationship between effort and reward is different. Yeah. Which is why the data's all over the shop, but which is why we need more data. And that's where you all come in.
All right, everyone. So big thank you to our guest speakers for your expertise and insights. So this marks the end of day one. Hopefully you've worked up a thirst. For those of you who have registered, the welcome reception is in the outdoor exhibition area. Just remember to pace yourselves because tomorrow is a big night, and enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.